Hey everybody, this is Kendall from Butcher and the Florist. Jody's not with me today, he is working in Kentucky, but today we are going to be talking about the basics of Spotify. Think of it as Spotify 101. We ourselves are an indie band that is working on building up our Spotify platform as well, our followers, our streams, all that good stuff. So we're by no means experts on the subject, but we do want to share what knowledge we do have, because if we can help anybody make a difference in their music career, why not? In this video, we're going to kind of cover the basics of how to get your music onto Spotify using the Spotify for Artists platform, how to submit to playlists, and also some of the do's and don'ts with Spotify. Now, as most of you guys know, Spotify is a music streaming platform. It's also a great way for music discovery, for people to kind of find your music and become your fans. But there are a couple downsides. The first downside is there's a lot of competition. There's about 40,000 tracks uploaded to Spotify every single day. So you can imagine the incredible amount of content that's being created and uploaded that you are gonna have to compete with. The second downside is that there's not a very high payout. On average, Spotify pays about 0.0032 per stream. So as you can imagine, you're gonna have a lot of streams to get that to add up to a sizable revenue. The other downside is that there's just not a lot of tracking available, so you don't know who exactly is listening to your music, and you have no way to follow up with them. You can't take those people who saved your song and add them to your email list or anything like that. Whereas if you were running like Google ads or Facebook ads or something like that, you can always retarget those people. The same does not apply for Spotify, so it's not giving you a lot of data about who's actually listening, liking, saving your music. However, with all that being said, Spotify is one of the biggest music streaming platforms around. Most people are listening to music on Spotify or Pandora or YouTube. So it's really going to behoove you to know how to use Spotify and know how to use it to your benefit. So Spotify does have a great platform called Spotify for Artists, and basically it's a dashboard where you can see how many streams you're getting, you can see where those streams are coming from if you've been added to playlists, and it's how you can submit to the editorial playlists. Now, in order to get access to Spotify for Artists, you're gonna need to have some music on Spotify. In order to do this, you're gonna wanna use a distributor to get your music onto that platform. We personally use DistroKid. They're actually the partners of Spotify, but there's plenty out there: CD Baby, TuneCore, Symphonic. Do some research, find which one you want to go with. DistroKid is super user-friendly, they're very innovative, and they distribute your music everywhere. So it's not just Spotify, but they're going to distribute to Pandora, to Amazon, to TikTok, anywhere that you can purchase music. It's gonna be there. Once you upload your music into DistroKid or your preferred platform, you're gonna select Spotify as one of the options to distribute that music. It usually takes about 3 to 5 days or so for your song to actually be added to Spotify, so it's not something instantaneous. Just keep that in mind. And in general, you're gonna wanna submit your music to Spotify before the actual release date. So we actually have a song coming out really soon. It's called Afraid of Myself, and it's gonna be released on June 5th. We've already gone ahead and put it through DistroKid for distribution. It's not going to be actually available until June 5th, but it's already in our Spotify for Artists dashboard so that we can go ahead and submit it for that editorial playlist. We can also use that link and stuff for pre-save campaigns and a whole bunch of stuff. So you want to make sure that you're giving your music to your distributor well in advance of your actual release date so that you have time to actually promote it. So something that we did when we set up our Spotify account, we actually just went ahead and uploaded a cover song that wasn't like a big song that we were going to promote or anything. It was just something so that we had access to the Spotify for Artists dashboard. So we uploaded that cover. We set the release date right away because, again, we weren't going to spend a lot of time promoting it. We just wanted to have that access. So once it was submitted, once it was in Spotify, it was playing, all that good stuff, we could go in and then edit our profile. And editing your profile is important because it's just gonna make you look more professional, like you're a polished artist rather than an amateur. So here you can see our Spotify page. We've uploaded this banner in the back here. If you scroll to the bottom, we also have some playlists that we've uploaded. And you can make these playlists through your actual personal account. This is my account here. And then I can go ahead and select them as my artist. Now also at the top here, we have overview, we have about, we have concerts. We don't have any concerts coming up, but if you did, that'd be some information that you could add. We're in overview right now. If we hit about, this is gonna take us to our gallery and our bios and also our social media links. And these are all things that we have updated through the Spotify for Artists portal. So that's why it's kind of important that you get yourself onto that portal, you get access to it so that you can fill out all this information. We have where people listened, and we also have a couple playlists that we've been discovered on. Basically, if you're on any playlist, they're gonna show up over here on this discovered on, and this is gonna be a really useful tool later on when you're trying to submit your music for playlists. I'm gonna take you to the Spotify for Artists dashboard. I have it saved here, but it's just artist.spotify.com. You would need to log in. We already have our account set up. Now in here, at the top, we have our home, music, audience, and profile. So in music, this is where we're gonna go to submit any new music that we upload for those editorial playlists. Now, all of our other releases are also in here under songs. So we can see, this is showing me the past 28 days of streams here, and it's kind of showing them in order of the most streams to the least streams. Under releases, these are the singles that we've released as a band. This is an order of upload date, so this is not an order of streams, order of upload date. The playlist that we've been on, if you are in these editorial playlists or these algorithmic playlists, it would show up here. These are listener and user made playlists. And then our upcoming releases. If we go to audience here, this is going to give us a little bit more insight into who's actually listening to our music. We can kind of see the amount of streams that we're getting here every single day, the source of our streams, whether they're coming from listeners' own playlists and libraries, algorithmic playlists, the gender breakdown of our listeners, the age breakdown of our listeners, and then the top countries. We don't quite have enough data yet on our account to see listeners always like. They'll show you similar artists. This is actually going to be a really important thing though, to make sure that Spotify is using the correct algorithm for your music. So we're not quite there yet, but this will be something that you'll want to pay attention to in the future. And then our top countries where people are listening to your music. Now this list of countries here can also be important because it can help you determine if you're getting any plays from bots, which would be if you're on like a user-made playlist that's essentially buying their streams, which is what we don't want because that's just going to end up kind of destroying your algorithm and you're not getting any true fans then. You're just getting, bot listeners who don't care about your music. So you can definitely do a Google search and find some countries that you should be mindful of if you start to see them a lot. France is definitely one that's had a lot of bot users lately. Mexico is one, Malaysia, maybe Brazil or Portugal. So do a little research, kind of find out what countries you need to be mindful of. Luckily for us, the top four here, this United States, Germany, UK, Japan, they don't have a really high amount of bot users. So we're looking pretty good over here. Now in profile, at the top, in your profile, this is where we can go ahead and edit. Right here, if you click that pencil, you can update your banner image. Artist pick, this is featuring our Bad Bitches playlist. So you could adjust this playlist if you have concerts coming up or something. That's where it'll be an artist pick. Artist playlists, again, right here, we can edit those here if we want to. Choose a playlist. So this is where if you made a playlist on your personal account, we could go in here and we could add that playlist in to our music profile. If we hit about, this is where we have our image gallery. So we could add some extra images if we want to. You can update your bio from here, and you can update all of your social links as well. So this is kind of the basics again on just how to set up your Spotify for Artists dashboard. So now we're going to talk about playlists. And playlists are really important when it comes to that music discovery side. Like I said, there's so much music being uploaded to Spotify every day that the chances of someone just kind of stumbling across your song are pretty slim. So the best way to get your music in front of these people is to get onto different playlists. And we have three kinds of playlists that you can submit your music to. Editorial, which is basically the people that work for Spotify listening to your music, determining if it's going to be a good fit for one of their playlists. Some of these editorial playlists, think like Rap Caviar, Hot Country, Rock This. The second type of playlist is algorithmic playlists, and this is basically AI using its information to put you on a couple different playlists, Discover Weekly and Release Radar. Now there's not a lot that you can do to control these algorithmic playlists, but there are a few things, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. And the final type of playlist is going to be user-generated or created playlists, and honestly I think this is where you want to be spending most of your time. You know, if you build up a ton of these kind of smaller playlists, eventually Spotify will take notice and add you to their algorithmic or maybe even their editorial. Just because maybe you don't get selected in that initial submission period for your editorial playlist, it doesn't mean that they won't find your song later and add it in. Now, you don't have control over that. However, if you're building up your streams and your credentials and your saves and stuff with these user-generated playlists, you never know what could happen. Now, editorial is the big one. This is what everybody wants, but they're very hard to get into. Obviously, there's a lot of competition. The good news is it's really easy to submit for these editorial playlists. I would recommend trying to submit your music at least 6 weeks in advance. Remember, so that's where that pre-release is really gonna come in handy. If you don't have 6 weeks of lead up time, that's okay. Submit it anyway, it can't hurt. But just know in general, your chances of getting on an editorial playlist are pretty low, but you should still do it anyway. Now with the editorial playlist, a couple other things you'll want to keep in mind. You can only submit one song at a time. So if you're doing like an EP release or something, you're only going to be able to submit one of those songs. And you can only do music that has not been released yet. So if you have songs that are already on Spotify, unfortunately you can't go back and submit those to the editorial playlist. It has to only be music that is unreleased, getting ready for release. So let's take a look at how to submit your music to an editorial playlist. So we're in your Spotify for Artists dashboard here. And you can see in the corner of the screen that we have our upcoming song that we're gonna pitch to the editors. So first thing is that we'll go into music and then we'll select upcoming. And here we have our single, Afraid of Myself, and right here it says pitch a song. Make it super easy for you. So in here, we're gonna fill out some information about this song. What is the song's main genre? And it's got a huge list to pick from. We're gonna go with pop, and then we can pick some subgenres here. I'm gonna select alt pop, contemporary pop. None of these other ones really fit, so I'm just gonna choose those two. Okay, to music cultures. This song I really don't think has much of a music culture to it, so I'm gonna skip that and then choose up to 2 moods here. Now it doesn't give you a huge selection here, but I would definitely still pick a couple just to kind of get it in front of the right people. I'm gonna choose sad and we'll say chill as well. And then 2 song styles as well. None of these really fit our song, so we're gonna skip that. Okay, now what instruments are on this song? We've got acoustic guitar, nothing here, drum kit, samples, I think there's some pianos, this is synth. Cool. Is this a cover? No. Is it a remix? No. Is it an instrumental? No. And how was it recorded in the studio? What language are the lyrics in? English. Awesome. And then we will head into the next page. Confirm they have the correct artist. This is Utch, Butcher and the Florist, top cities, all that stuff like that. What city do you most identify with? Chicago. And then you want to describe the song. So think of this as like your pitch. You're basically going to sell your song to the curators that are listening to it, and it's going to help them, if they choose to select it, put it into the right playlist as well. So once you have your description filled out, you'll go ahead and click next, and then you're just reviewing the information that you are ready to submit, and then you hit pitch. And that is it. Thanks to your pitch. That's all you have to do to submit your songs to the editorial Spotify playlist. All right, so let's talk about the second kind of playlist, and this is algorithmic playlists. Now, again, there's not a ton that you can do to get your music onto these playlists. However, there's good habits that you can build to increase your chances. The algorithmic playlist takes a lot of stuff into consideration. It's not only the data that's stored in Spotify, things like getting blog mentions and stuff will also help increase your chances of getting on these places. So even stuff that's happening kind of outside of Spotify, the press and everything that you're doing to build up your releases, that's all going to help your chances of getting onto algorithmic Spotify's and telling Spotify what kind of music you make and what kind of playlist it should be on. And this is important because a lot of people tend to just want to get their music onto any and every playlist. But what happens when you do that is you kind of dilute your algorithm. Spotify now doesn't know what kind of music you make. So if you're a punk rock band, but you're putting your music into metal playlists, it's going to categorize you as a metal artist, and it's going to be showing your punk rock music to fans of metal music, and they're not going to like your stuff. They're probably not going to save it. It's not going to do you any favors in the long run. So you really want to be smart when you're kind of curating your algorithm and make sure that you're doing it to your benefit. How you can do this is by submitting to the user-generated playlist in styles that are specific to you and trying to get on playlists with similar artists. Now, Release Radar is an algorithmic playlist. And this playlist is going to show your music to your followers, your new music to your followers. So that's why having, a lot of followers can be great. But again, just make sure that they're actually interested in your music. Because once again, if you're getting your music in front of people that aren't actually listening to it, that are skipping it, Spotify is going to see that and they're going to think that, oh, your music kind of sucks. So make sure that you're not just trying to pad your numbers and get a whole bunch of followers on your account that don't care about your music. It should be people that are actually interested in hearing what you're making. So the third type of playlist is going to be user-created playlists. And this is really where you can build up a lot of streams and hopefully a lot of fans and people that are actually interested in your music. So there's definitely a few ways that you can get onto these playlists, and it's going to require some digging and some sleuth work on your part. But there's a couple things we want to keep in mind when we're looking for these user-generated playlists is that we're looking for similar genres, similar artists. The best ones are going to have a pretty good mix of some major artists mixed with those indie artists, and that they aren't getting a lot of bot streams from some of those countries that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to show you a way that you can kind of check out different playlists and really make sure that you're submitting to the right ones for you. Another thing to keep in mind with these user-created playlists is that the majority of them are going to cost money. If it's a good playlist, you're going to have to pay for it. Now, it's up to you if you want to go that route and pay people to put your music on their playlists, but I just want you to set that expectation. I will give you some kind of low cost or free options as well for submitting your music. We haven't found a very, high return on that. The playlist that we have gotten on using kind of free avenues, we just don't get very many streams from at all. So kind of make that decision for yourself. I personally don't think that there's anything wrong for paying for decent, smart playlists. We pay for advertising, and it's kind of the same thing. In a perfect world, it wouldn't work that way, but that's just the way it is right now. So let's take a look at how you can find some playlists to get onto. Now, keep in mind when you're submitting to these user playlists, your music does already have to be out on Spotify. You're not going to be able to pre-submit like you do for the editorial playlist. It will have to be submitted once your song is already out. And I would, using the tools that I'm about to show you, I would go ahead and just make kind of a spreadsheet of everybody that you're going to submit to, so that way when your song is out, you can get it done in a day and just be right on top of it. Now, there's a few ways that you can find these user-generated playlists. The first way that I'm going to show you is to look up a similar artist, and I like to choose an artist that is kind of has a similar social blueprint, so not somebody who's super huge because they're probably going to be in the official Spotify playlist. I want to find maybe a smaller indie artist, so I'm going to go and choose Emily Blue. She's a local artist. She does electro pop music, kind of similar to us, and I'm going to hit About. Now, here it discovered on, I see all the playlists that she's on. Now, Spotify used to tell me where or how many listeners she was getting from each of these playlists, and it was a really helpful tool to determine if it was actually a pretty decent playlist or if the playlist just had a lot of bots and bot streams. One thing that will help us is by looking at where people listen. If we see some red light countries in here, we know that maybe these aren't the best playlists. So if we were seeing things like Chile in here or Thailand, you know, like anywhere that gets really like cheap clicks, cheap listeners, then it might not be a good indication to use some of her playlists. These all look decent, right? These are all the US, so she's pretty good here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at this best female artists. Now, in the perfect world, all of the curator's contact information is going to be right here at the top underneath the title of the playlist. Unfortunately, this curator did not have their information up here, but that's okay. We can always do a Google search to look for it. Before we find that contact information though, we want to take a look through this and just make sure that it's going to be the right fit for us. The best playlist is going to have a mix of some major artists, some indie artists, and this actually looks really great. I would definitely submit my music to this. It's not a huge playlist, 1,900 listeners, but if they're engaged listeners, you know, that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and search The Beat Matters. And right here we have their Twitter. There's no contact information up here, but that's okay because we can always just send them a DM and ask, you know, how they would like us to submit the music. If I scroll down, I can also see though that their tweets are pretty old, so this person might not be super active right now. So another thing to kind of consider, are they updating how often are they updating their playlists? Now we can also take this playlist and we can look at it in Chartmetric. And Chartmetric is a site which basically aggregates a whole bunch of data from a lot of different socials, not just Spotify, but Instagram and stuff like that. I have a free account. The paid account gives you a ton of really great information, but it is super expensive. So I just stick with the free one to get what information I can. So right here, we search them for the name of the playlist and we can pull it up. Now right here we have this engagement number, and this is the average monthly listeners divided by the followers, and we can see that the number is at 15%. Now when you're doing your research, and if you search in Chartmetric, you might find a lot popping up at 0, and that's because Spotify recently changed the way that it's showing information. So like I said earlier, it's not showing how many streams an artist is getting from a playlist, so Chartmetric isn't able to aggregate that information anymore. So one thing we can do is look down here at followers, and we can just kind of see the trend. This is showing us from April 2nd to April 25th, so like the last month, and then the number of tracks over time. So it's kind of pretty much stayed the same right in here until April 16th. It looks like he did add a track, so it actually has been updated. That's good. And tracks by record labels, and this is helpful to determine maybe if a playlist is actually owned by a record label, which you're going to run into. Things like Digster Music, that's actually a record label, and it's not really worth your time to submit to those. Now we can also go into the actual curator's profile, The Beat Matters. And he's got 13 playlists, so we can go ahead and click on playlist at the top, and we can take a look at some of his different playlists here. Maybe there's one that's actually might be a better fit, and we can see the 28-day change as well in the Spotify playlist numbers. So if there's a huge jump in this 28-day change, there's a chance that they may have been paying for followers, so be mindful of that. Over here in the far corner, we also have when the playlist was last updated. So if we look at best female artist, we can see it was actually updated just like a day or two ago. So this would be one that I would probably go ahead and submit for. Now, if we're done with Emily Blue, one thing we can do on her profile, we can go to fans also like, and we'll see a list here of similar artists. They're gonna have a similar sound and a similar monthly listenership. So we can go ahead and just go and select one of these artists, and then we can hit about to check out what playlist they're on as well. Now again, we want to check her locations really quick, just make sure that she's getting her streams from the right countries, and that all looks good. And then we go through it the same way. We can hit Instagram songs, we can check and make sure that this is a playlist that has a similar sound to us, and then right here at the top we see an email to where to send music. So this makes it super easy to do the submission. Chances are if they have their contact information, they're probably going to charge for your playlist submissions, just a heads up on that, but at least it's easy to reach out to them. Followers 23,000, and if we want to, we can check Chartmetric and see if we can find a little bit more information about them. We see Instagram songs right here, the last updated on 4/23, so they're staying pretty active on it. They have about 2,000 estimated listeners. If we go here to their page, we can see about a 10% engagement rate. Now, another way that we can search for playlists that might be right for us is to search by genre. So I'm going to go ahead and search for alt pop music, and I'm going to select playlists. Now we're going to see right away that we have some official Spotify playlists, and we can tell because the user right here is Spotify. They also have this Spotify emblem right here. Now don't be fooled, because there is going to be some playlists that actually put the Spotify emblem on their picture even though they're not official Spotify playlists, like this one by Rosenfeld. He's got the little icon here, but this is not an official Spotify playlist. So once again, just like we did with the Emily Blue playlist, we'll just go ahead and select it. We'll look through, we'll make sure that these are, it's a good fit for our music. We'll look up here to see if there's contact information. There is submissions on Instagram, and then we can go ahead and look it up on Chartmetric and, see if we can find out a little bit more information about the playlist. Third and final way to be finding these playlists is to search by mood. So instead of searching for your genre, we can search for things like songs to cry to. And I like how Adele is like the first one, of course. So, songs to cry to right here. We see they've got about 2,000 followers. This wouldn't necessarily be the best playlist for me, but that's okay. This person does not have any contact information. That's okay. Instead, we are just going to look up this person and see if we can find them on Google. So, we have Carla Espinoza on YouTube. This could be her. Carla Espinoza on Instagram. Now this is where your detective digging and sleuth work is really going to come into play to kind of find out who this person is. Right here we see on her YouTube, she's got a YouTube playlist of songs to cry to. I think this is the same person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit about and see if we have any information here. We don't. We're locked out there. So what I would probably do in this case is I would DM this person on Instagram, Carla Espinoza here, and say, hey, love your playlist. What's the deal? How do I get music on it? All that good stuff. So you're gonna have to kind of get creative about how you reach out to some of these people. A lot of time in this about section, there will be an email address listed. Unfortunately, there's not right now. That's okay. Now I do want to show you one thing that is kind of a red flag here. So if we look at this playlist pop music, we look at the 28-day change and we see that they've gained 40,000 listeners in 28 days. That's a bit of a red flag. That's a lot of listeners to gain in just a month. This would be a pretty good indication that these listeners were bought. So they're going to be either like click farms, click bots, really cheap listeners. This is something I would stay away from. Now, when you're looking for these smaller user-generated playlists, don't just go for the ones with the giant numbers. A lot of times, as we've discovered, those are going to be kind of padded numbers. Even the smaller ones that have just a couple hundred of followers, if they're really active and engaged listeners, that's where you can really build some great connections and get those saves. And those saves are important to your algorithm. Pre-saves is when you are going to release a song and people can save the music to their Spotify account or profile before it's actually released, so when it is, it's right away in their library. And pre-saves can be important in telling Spotify that, hey, people are interested in your music. But what's even more important than pre-saves is the saves you get once your song is actually released. I think a lot of artists put way too much time and effort and importance on trying to get pre-saves instead of focusing on the saves they get once their music is out. That's what's really going to tell Spotify that people like and enjoy your music. That's why it's so important to get your music onto the right playlist so that you can actually build real fans and not just numbers. So that's probably the best way of submitting to user-generated playlists, but there is a couple other ways that you can do as well. You can use Submit Hub. This is a paid platform. It's about $1 per submission, and there's a bunch of Spotify and Apple and Deezer playlists on there, and also music blogs and stuff like that. Basically, you're paying for somebody to listen to your music. The actual rate, though, I think is pretty fair. I've sent out hundreds of emails to blogs and stuff that never get a response, and the benefit here is you are guaranteed a response. Whenever you pay for your submission, you are guaranteed to get a response back. So you can use Submit Hub to submit your music for Spotify playlists. You can also, there's a couple of sites out, IndieMomo, SoundPlate. These are free submission sites where you can submit your music. We've used SoundPlate a lot and we have gotten on a fair amount of playlists this way. However, we get very, very low streams from any of the SoundPlate Spotify playlists that we submit to. The way SoundPlate works is when you submit your song, you also have to follow the playlist. So it's a way for the playlist to get their numbers up without getting real listeners. Kind of like what we've seen in here, a lot of these padded numbers and stuff. It's from using SoundPlate. I probably follow, 50 to 100 different playlists that I've never listened to a single time. And it's from all these SoundPlate submissions that I'm doing. So we don't use SoundPlate very often. We kind of used it at the very beginning when we were first getting into Spotify. And once we learned more about the algorithm, we don't really use SoundPlate all that much. But you can use it. It's a free service. So feel free to give it a try. Now, a couple more do's and don'ts when it comes to submitting your music to Spotify playlists and just using Spotify in general. The Spotify playlist services. We have never used one before. We don't plan to in the near future. They tend to be fairly expensive, and what they're doing is work you can do yourself. A lot of times the submission fee that you're paying is actually going to pay the playlist that they're putting their music on, and you can do that anyway. Might as well take your dollars to give it directly to the playlist you want to be in and just cut out that middleman. They might even be making their own playlist and putting your music on them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. They could actually have some really good playlists and stuff that they're putting your music on. But in general, the playlist services out there are not worth the dollar spent. It's better off to just, pay to put your music in the playlist that you want to be on, that you can really do the homework and make sure it's the right fit for your music and has, a high engagement level and all that stuff, rather than just kind of, I think, throwing your money away with some of these services. Other things to avoid when you're using Spotify is follow for follow, and I see this happen a lot on tons of different social platforms. Anytime you do this, you're destroying your algorithm. You're now putting your content in front of people who don't care about your content. It happens on Instagram all the time, and it definitely happens on Spotify. Remember that you want engaged people who actually want to be there, who want to comment and like and subscribe and save and all that stuff. So if you're just doing it with, other random musicians, a follow for follow so that you can pad your numbers, those other musicians aren't listening to your songs, most likely. Maybe some of them are. I bet most of them aren't. So try to stay away from those follow for follows. I know it's tempting because it's free and you get these little boost in your metrics and stuff, but it's not doing you any favors in the long run. So avoid follow for follow. Just keep in mind that there's very little return on investment when it comes to Spotify. So if you've got ad money, I would not put all of my ad money into running Spotify ads. And when I say Spotify ads, I don't mean the actual ads that are on Spotify. I mean maybe running Instagram ad that sends people to your Spotify. You can definitely get some good interested listeners that way, but remember the cost of your ad versus the amount that you're going to get back per stream usually won't end up in your favor. And we don't have a way to track those people, right? So we don't really know anything about the people that are liking and saving your music. You don't know who they are. Now, if you want to get farther into ads and stuff, there are lots of great sources out there. One of my favorite, Indiepreneur, can give you all the information that you need on setting up Spotify ads. I know Ari Herstand has a course about Instagram story ads for Spotify. There's a ton of content out there if that's what you're interested in. Hope this gave you a really good overview and picture on how you can use Spotify to your benefit, how to submit your music. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down into the comments below. Again, we're learning the ins and outs of Spotify and every other platform as well, but we like to share any information that we gather with you. We spent a lot of time doing trial and error, trying things that didn't work, destroying our algorithm, rebuilding our algorithm, all that stuff. And if we can save anyone from some of the mistakes that we've made in the past, that's what we want to do. So thanks for listening. As always, you can like this video, you can subscribe down below. We release content every month. Some of it is going to be informational, like this tutorial, and then we also release some fun cover videos and original music as well. And below are all the ways that you can follow and keep in touch with us. Join our mailing list if you like. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're watching during quarantine, stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon.
I'm a friend of myself.